No, no buzz. Just Bees Book Club. Leech by Hiron Ennes uh, is a book I have read and have feelings about. This might be maybe 5 minutes. This might be 45 minutes. Let's fucking see what happens. This came out in 2022. Paperback came out this year. I like this book quite a bit. There are things that I have trouble with. There are things that I think are fucking brilliant that I have trouble with. There are things that I think are less so. Um, it's I don't know. This book is fucking cool and weird and good and complicated, and the language in it sort of like I don't want to say struggles between. That's the word I almost use, but like the language like vacillates in this weird way. But like, okay, here's the high level. This is a book club just for bees, by the way. The Institute shows up to a small town in the winter because the Baron's previous doctor has died, apparently by suicide, and the Institute has sent another doctor. The doctor's name is the Institute, or Service Before Self is the answer they give when when a name is requested. They are a chemically neutered individual who is entirely colonized by a parasite. This parasite is the Institute. This parasite is a hive mind. The first half of the book is basically introducing you to this particular doctor who has come to take care of the Baron and the Baron's son DJ. There's Emil, who is the mute servant, the non-speaking servant. It is never made clear, I don't think, if that is a choice or a physical condition. But Emil never speaks. DJ, the son of the Baron, is married to a woman named Elaine. That's probably close enough to how you pronounce it. It's got the it's like Helen with the grave accent on the second E. So I think it's like Elaine, something like that. Who has been having miscarriages for decades or whatever, with one exception, which is these twins who are always getting their hair tied together. They live in a big fucking mansion in a perpetually snowy, or from what we see, snowy area called the Can I flip to a random page and see if I can find the name of this place? The world building in here is fucking wild. Verdera? No, that's like the big city. I don't remember. Maybe that is the place. There's like the main source of income for the reason the Baron is a Baron is like in charge of all these lands is there's like a wheat rock mine. Wheat rock seems to be some sort of stone that is also edible. There's a town full of folks you meet a handful of. There's, I think, is Baker is the name of the person who is sort of the closest that the Institute has to like a confidant. There's the priest who seems to be some sort of trans man who is like the sort of holder of the old knowledge. Emil specifically is like the last of the sort of the native folks in this area who were all killed because there was an uprising against the Baron, and the Baron killed them. Just did a full on genocide, but for some reason employs the final member of that indigenous peoples. There's some really deeply fucked up shit that's happening there, honestly, that like took me actually listening to a different podcast about. I did a thing. I went on YouTube and looked up this book to see what people had talked about it, and there was something called the Robot Elf Book Club, I believe, um, who only seemed to have done like 4 or 5 episodes, but they had a really interesting discussion that helped me unlock some of the aspects of this book that were a little unclear to me. One way to pitch this book is to say, did you ever want to read an Animorphs book from the perspective of the Yeerks? Because that's kind of what's happening. Not exactly. There's a different kind of parasite. There's a different installation method into humanity, but there's something about like, people's bodies being turned over into other minds that are specifically parasitic minds, who are, in this case, not, the Yeerks were more actively attempting to colonize the entirety of humanity. This is more about finding a niche. There's a particular line that came up that I remember, like, when I read it, I was like, that seems like a little bit pat, but it does stick with one. But there's something about, like, the most intelligent parasites are the kinds who find a way to live, find a way not to destroy their hosts. And there's like a follow-up with that. There's a little bit of discussion of parasitism, and there's a good line at the end of it that's something like, this only really matters when like, it talks about how so many parasites, unlike the Institute, because this is the Institute talking, are like so short-sighted that they will like not even like allow the host body that they develop in to survive, much less like tend to the species. And there's a line like that, but this this kind of only really matters with humans because humans hold grudges, which is pretty good. Specifically, the Institute is this parasite that has been around for about 500 years in this time, and plans to live 5,000 more. It basically sort of takes control of a human body, sort of severs neurons that it doesn't need, like is literally like embedded at the level of like knowledge, as much as anything else, and has sort of established itself as doctors. It is like the medical provider for this world. It's a fucking cool premise. If you don't fuck with that premise, I don't know, man. That's what are you doing out there? What are you reading? What are you reading out there if you're not fucking with that? Huh? The book goes on to sort of okay, again, so the setting I think is extremely important and extremely good. It is this snow blasted northern like mining town. It is a company town that is just like snowed in for basically the entirety of the book. It is also a gothic. So yeah, the Baron's mansion. There's rooms that no one's been in for years. There's this constant like discussion of whether or not there are ghosts there. The twins specifically talk about ghosts a bunch. They're like hiding what's the oh my god small figures, not totems. I guess maybe totems is a fine word, but they're like hiding things around the house to sort of repulse the ghosts. That is actually a plot point that gets resolved. A lot of stuff gets extremely resolved in this book in a way that like I think would usually annoy me if I'm being completely honest. Like, hey, give me those loose threads, baby. Give me those fucking loose threads. I want the loosest threads. Just the loosest threads. Just don't wrap anything up. I don't give a fuck. But this book does it really well in a way that it didn't read to me as sort of like pat or like too cute, which is an issue I do find I often have with stories that go, here's a thing, 200 pages later, oh, but actually it was this thing. Like I tend to find that cloying and frankly insufferable if it's done even a little bit wrong. Here, what I think this book does better than anything else is this really. It has this really thorough sense of world building. Like everything seems real in the way that, like, it's not just like that Ennis had like a Bible that they referred back to, in the way that like shows do or whatever, like the or like large fantasy series. Like here's it's not it doesn't seem extremely good world building in the way that like the Silmarillion to the Lord of the Rings is like a lot of world building. It doesn't have the sense of everyone who's ever begat anyone is named and enumerated and like in a separate document somewhere that Ennis can refer to if something happens. It's more in the sense that like the world seems to be built out of systems that all interact with one another, and like the things that have a place in this world have a place in this world because the author has thought through what the implications of them being there are. And I'm like, yo, that's my shit. That's extremely my shit. I love that. I don't love doing it, but I love reading a book where you can go, I they really figured this out, even though I'm not going to be able to figure this out for a little while or maybe ever. One little example of this, right? So one of the things I didn't exactly love as much as like specifically like priest, but like a lot of the sort of like miners dialogue in this, like Baker, for instance, I think is sort of on the same page. They speak with this weird, to me, kind of stilted mixture of like Scottish and French dialects. It's all wrapped up together, like a maybe like a Scottish person who grew up in Quebec or something like that, if that makes sense, or spent spent time in both Scotland and Quebec, growing up. And there's just moments, I don't know how to be marked or anything like that, but I remember having moments reading it where I was just like, this dialogue feels a little cobbled together in a way that like that is maybe indicative of the way I'm talking about it. Like it doesn't feel like a unified speaker. Like it doesn't feel like somebody who grew up with a mixture of Scotch and Scottish and French, but like somebody was writing dialogue, frankly. But the thing is, so there's a sort of a monster that occurs throughout this book. Or maybe here's an even simpler answer, or example. I believe it's priest, maybe Baker, who refers to the institute as Maid Sane, M-E with a accent, D-S-A-I-N-E. And I've spent a little while trying to figure out how to pronounce that, and I kind of like landed on Maid Sane, something like that, which is a pretty decent example, I think, in my brain at least, of like this mixture of like Scottish and French, because it kind of doesn't sound exactly like either, which is like cool, but also other parts are more stilted. There's an animal, there's a monster here that I was about to say, that is like this weird elk beast or pack, that sort of like hunts with the wind, that like shows up and gets shot at or whatever every once in a while. It's called the Ventigau. At least that's how I was reading it. Like 2/3 of the way through this book, I was like, oh, a Wendigo. Oh, medsane, like medicine. Oh. my dumbass. Like, it took me 2 years of this book to realize, like, one of the things that Ennis is playing with is just like estranging language just enough to make it, um, to make it defamiliarized, to pull Brecht out or whatever. Like, there are things in here that are very simple things that are just off enough, and that is the story. That is Gothic literature, right? On some level, the things that we take to be normal are suddenly made strange. It's horror, fucking frankly. Um, the Gothic is, the house at some point, is the baron, is the family, is the wealth. But like, this is what I say when I this is what I mean when I say that, like, this book is very, very well written in certain ways, where it's like things like parts of the dialogue coming off, at least to me, and maybe I just don't have the ear for it in the same way that Ennis does or that other readers might, but like bits of the dialogue feel a little stilted, and then shit like that happens, and I go, oh, I'm a fucking dumbass. It's a Wendigo. It's a fucking Wendigo. Of course it's. Oh my god, this is bringing me to a different state, which is, I don't know, very lovely. There are so many fucked up scenes in this book. There is like so much stuff that if you don't fuck around with, it very well might be in here. It's been about a week and a half or so since I finished this book. So like, there's like things in here that I like thought about and wanted to talk about that I'm not gonna remember because I didn't take notes or anything like that. God, do I want to talk about, like, I don't really think the characters. I mean, so here's the other half of the premise of this book. Right? So this doctor comes in, part of this institute. The previous doctor was also part of the institute because all doctors are part of the institute. The big mystery for this new doctor is why they don't remember the last month or so of this previous doctor's life, because all of them are together. Like, there's fucking great scenes in this of like the doctor like being like, I have a question, and then they'll just cut away to 100 miles south, where another parasitized person who's a part of the institute is like flipping through an old library, or a doctor is performing surgery on somebody and just says out loud the answer to a question that its body up 100 miles north has. Just really good shit. Frankly, like, pretty decent camera use in this book, because it does feel very filmic at times. There's like, especially the descriptions of the snow and like specific architectural or design elements of the Baron's house, but especially like when I say camera movement, right, I'm talking about shift in POV that is allowed by this construct of having a hive mind to just like, here's a quick sentence where you're like, bam, I am in this city very far away with this other doctor who has this to chime in on about what's going on. Because they're always in contact in this way, the new doctor and the whole institute is like wondering why they don't remember the whereabouts of the last doctor, how the death happened, who did it, etc., etc. And the answer is very clear at the beginning, like from the jump, that the last doctor died by suicide with I believe a fire poker to the neck. Again, this gets fucking graphic, and it's really cool. And the answer is found out fairly quickly. I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff now, including the end of this book, because I want to talk about the world, and you kind of have to. This previous doctor, you find out, was infected with another parasite, actually, that the new institute ends up naming Pseudomycota Emilia, based on Emil's name. Um, this pseudomycota comes from the mines. It seems to have been dislodged from a some sort of earthquake-ish thing that happens fairly regularly in the last couple of months, and it is sort of infecting people very slowly. It seems to have its own sort of sentience. If not sentience, it has its own ability to move. But the way you find this out, is the new doctor does an autopsy of the old doctor and just pops the eye out, and there's a bunch of fucking black, stringy material attached to the back of this doctor's eye. And they're like, well, that's not a part of my parasitic body, so there must be another parasite in here, and I have no fucking idea what it does. And so I need to start investigating this immediately. This new parasite, it seems to be infecting everyone in the town who's had contact with the mine since the last shifting. But not everyone, because Emil seems to be somehow immune to it, which is interesting. I don't really know how I feel about that, frankly. There's a shade of like I mean, I think it explicitly says at some point or the Institute says in a moment of desperation, like that, you know, the people native to this place must be automatically immune to it, which it feels to me not gross necessarily, but definitely on the verge of some like indigenous fetishization. I don't know. I don't have a ton to say about that, but like it kind of ran through the back of my brain a couple times over the course of this book, and I was like, but there's so much else happening that also, and I'm not confident in my read in that way, and like even in my own brain, much less saying it out loud. So I shouldn't have said shit, frankly. But yeah, there's a new parasite in town, and the Institute is very upset about it and wants to learn as much as it can about it before it gets rid of it, because it seems to be able to subvert the Institute's own processes, including like the production of human hive minds, which is fucking cool. Also, it's fucking cool. This book is so cool. I'm quite pleased with having read it, frankly. I'm very excited for whatever Ennes does next, also. Going deeper, there's a story that the priest tells to the Institute at one point, which is basically about how... Sorry, I'm wrong. The priest tells this to a person that the Institute is operating on, like one of the other miners or one of the other, you know, members of the sort of church, I guess, the priest runs, about how the sky used to be all black, that there were no stars, and then eventually, one day, the sky fell, and it fell in the shape of dogs' noses. And these dogs' noses littered the world and made it completely unlivable for centuries, if not decades, if not centuries. And that's like the origin of the world that they live in. And it's a good little bit of myth making. It's also, I think, basically the premise of the world. So I'm going to try to sketch out the premise of the world as best I can here. I believe what we are dealing with in Leech is the Earth in a couple of centuries, maybe a millennia. There seems to have been some big catastrophe that ended things. It's sort of vaguely gestured at, but I believe largely a climate catastrophe. the world sort of ends with a mad rush to get off the planet, but it sort of fails. Is the guess. Um, there is presumably, massive climate spikes in different directions. But the thing is, the humans who had tried to get off the planet, or the civilization that existed at the time when it became uninhabitable, made massive amounts of satellites, starships, etc., that sort of thing. I think the dog's noses are satellites, and like literally, I think probably like waste disposal capsules or something like that. Um, so yeah, at some point, Earth is evacuated, and what we were dealing with is a millennia later, maybe the slow reincorporation of people. But it has to be at least centuries, because the Institute has been around for 500 years at this point. And it seems like society had been established or reestablished for a while before that. And all of that time period seems to be in this post-apocalyptic period. The alternative is that the dog's noses were or some sort of warhead, right? There was like a space race, a defense race, a Star Wars, whatever. Not the movies. Thing happening, and then this massive payload landed on Earth after people had left and then started reestablishing themselves, and then this massive payload landed or whatever. Yeah. Again, working off memory here from about a week change ago, having read a few other books. Didn't write this down, has just been fucking bubbling around in my head. It could be way fucking off. That's everything. Everything here I'm saying could be wrong. You don't know. I don't know. We're all bees here. So yeah, that's sort of the origin story and the sort of implication at some point near the end, because our doctor does get infected with a pseudomycota. There's like a fucking cool moment when they like realize that the way it reproduces is by basically like by spores, by being burned. It's like, oh, that's fucking dope. But there's a moment when then the rest of the institute or other parts of the institute show up to this barony, when the replacement doctor has sort of like regained parts of herself, starting with her period, which is a pretty fucked up scene. And then so there's this moment where the doctor who was the institute gets to talk to the institute, and starts to have this conversation, and this is a fucking killer line. There's a bit where it's like, the institute is like, we are nothing like the pseudomycota. We don't resemble each other at all. And the doctor says basically like, you resemble each other the way that a bacteria resembles its phage. And there's this like whole implication. It's like, oh shit, like, is pseudomycota like literally the cure for the institute? Is it like, is it penicillin to the institute in a weird way? But also it's its own thing that has this, like, there's a scene very early on, like when the doctor goes to the mine, and the pseudomycota, like they see it in the mine, and the pseudomycota like follows them out of the mine with wriggling tentacles, and a fucking dog just nomps it, and then it's just the thing for like 100 pages. And that's fucking cool also, because there's a snowy ass area with a dog that may or may not be an alien. That's fun. Dog gets away. But like there's the scene where this dog does like bite this like fucking weird tentacle arm bacteria thing, that's like hulking at the doctor through the snow. So like Pseudomycota isn't simply, penicillin to the institute. It is its own thing that seems to have some sort of life or sentience. It also like there's the moment where the doctor is like is trying to figure out what it is, and it does a bunch of tests, and they like they poke it and they prod it, they submerge it in different things, they try to feed it different things, and nothing seems to interact. But then the moment that they drop some of their own blood, and blood that includes the doctor as well as the human being, Pseudomycota is like, yum. So much cool shit in here. Yeah, okay, hold on. What else have I got to say? It's very funny that this ends in a big chase sequence, a big escape sequence, I guess is a better way to put it. Also very funny that I'm talking about this one the week after I talk about Shakespeare's Planet by Simak, because like there's actually a lot these two books have in common, and I just happened to read them both at the same time. I don't think that there was any influence in one direction there. I suspect. I mean, the influences on Leech are very, not all extremely obvious, but are fairly obvious, right? It's like I said, the thing weighs heavily on this. I don't think Animorphs actually is an influence, but it might be. It could be. It might be. Wuthering Heights, fucking. So they're extremely obvious, then I blank on everything. It's gothic horror. It's like weird fiction. It is medical horror. It is body horror occasionally. Yeah, I think it's this like the quote on the front is from Tamsin Muir, author who I have whatever no love lost for, but the blurb is a wonderful new entry into a wonderful new entry to gothic science fiction. Think Wuthering Heights with worms, which is like not a bad. It's a good cover blurb. It's not really worms. It's Parasite. It's been a long time since I even tried to read Wuthering Heights, but it's fun to read a good book that does weird things. But yeah, it's funny that Shakespeare Planet was the last thing that I did for this channel, because like the thing I talked about in that episode is like it has a phenomenal anticlimax, right? It's there's all this stuff happening, and Simak kind of comes together at the end and goes like, well, I guess I could tie these things up in a page and a half, and then have people wander off and talk about how pretty the nature is or whatever. This is like it's not that, but it's not that also. Leech has like this ending that goes like it does the gothic thing, right? And the house burns down. It does the gothic thing. Burning houses, just one of my favorite images, regardless of where it's deployed. But then the house burns down, and unlike Mexican Gothic, it doesn't go cut away, wrap things up, goodbye. It goes, let's tell an adventure story where we have to run through the snow for weeks or whatever, and like survive, and let's like wrap back around to all, again, just to say the thing that I said sort of near the beginning, like let's wrap back around, and like this thing that's been gone for 200 pages is here, and then this thing that's been like looming for 300 pages is here, and then this thing that like you fucking forgot about even though it was only 50 pages ago, that's here too. It does like it does a whole fucking sequence with all of that, and again, that's a thing that I often find extremely boring. But here it's not so much that it feels like yeah, oh, I've I have laid all these loose ends out for you now, and now we can weave them together and have a tapestry. It's more like this world feels so thoroughly understood. Not, again, not in terms of like, here's the lore Bible, here's all the bits and bobs that we're gonna make sure are all like in a row so that you can make your little wiki page about it. It's just like, this is how the world is operating. Clocks are ticking, things are happening, even when the camera's on. One person, that's not, the world doesn't stop. Things keep moving, things come together in very particular ways because they do. There's one exception to this. The like last scene of the book is like this encounter with a kid who is also like the first person who shows up in the thing, and when that happened, I was just like, I was like, Ennes, you're lucky that you wrote a fucking cool ass book that I really liked, because it's this. I would, if this didn't do a bunch of other things extremely well, I would be like, I'm out. I don't fucking care. I don't know. I know I'm 3 pages away from the end, but like, fuck off. This is boring. This is boring to me. But luckily, it did do all those other things, and I really liked it. So it can have that one moment of like a little fan servicey kind of fucking like, aha, you thought I forgot about you, but I didn't. Little kid with the weird gloves, come back along. Yeah, very stage magic vibe to me on that one specifically. And it's, that's just a predilection thing. I just don't like that ever in anything. I didn't really like it here either, but I did like a lot of other stuff here. So that's Leech. You're a B. I'm a B. Thanks for not watching.